about the first two episodes when they first dropped back in April.
April. Yeah.
Wow. And we were like, we'll talk about the Twilight Zone as it comes about. Well, as the episodes come out and we think they're worth talking about, it's going to be a show everybody's going to want to see. And I don't think I've seen anybody else really talking about this show. And I think that's probably where the majority of the conversation will gravitate towards. But because I feel like this could be an overly negative review, I wanted to start with, what were some things you liked about the Twilight Zone?
Yeah, I like. We talked about this a little bit on the review of the first salvo of episodes, but I like that this is clearly existing. This is also a negative. We'll talk about the negative part, but it's clearly existing in like the 2019 space as far as the Twilight Zone goes, right? So the observations on society are thus updated for today.
Yep.
And I think when this anthology show shined the best in this first season was when it was trying to craft stories around episodes that actually felt like of the moment. The third episode, Replay, as well as the seventh episode, Not All Men. Maybe they weren't the subtlest displays, but I like that that's where they try to take it. And there's actually like at least trying to actually provoke some thought, even if the conceit might be easy to grasp and maybe the episode lengths are too padded out, So I like that. I think when there are good episodes of this season, I think it's just overall it was not as frequent as everyone expected.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. I think what I liked about this is the Twilight Zone is obviously an iconic television show, and this version is a little bit different. It's a little bit longer than I think most of them were back then, or I feel like a lot of them fell into like the 30-minute, maybe even only 40 minutes, and this was a little bit longer in form. But it did try to add a fresh take onto a lot of these things, and I feel like where the show was most successful for me and most engaging for me is when it kind of leaned into the weirdness. And you mentioned how an episode like Not All Men, which is a pretty interesting critique on societal issues and real things people deal with. I think I liked more something like The Traveler with Stephen Yeun, for just how strange it was and how it didn't really try to explain anything, and it was like this mind fuck the whole time. And I think when they did that, it did pretty well. There was like six Degrees of Freedom, the episode with a bunch of really famous people, but like Jessica Williams was in that one. I really liked that because it felt like a very like confined, it was a big story, but within a small setting, which I thought really worked well. I feel like when they try to do big things is when it really just didn't land. Something like Replay, which, kind of a small story, but within this bigger scope of racial violence and racism in society. And I felt like that was a bit on the nose at the end and didn't necessarily have the impact it could have. So I feel like that's kind of my biggest critique and why I think there were some really good episodes and some that just felt totally flat.
Yeah, honestly. And I think a negative for a lot of the episodes was just that the audience just kind of gets the conceit or figures out the logical conclusion, gets the point much sooner than the episode does. And thus you're kind of just twiddling your thumbs waiting for the resolution to happen that you already know. And that's kind of why A Traveler is such a great episode, because like you said, there really isn't anything to figure out. It's just some weird shit. And Stephen Yeun's awesome. And you just get to sit there and watch it, You're not trying to figure anything out. Well, you are, but it doesn't actually matter, So, like we talked about this, but the first episode, the comedian kind of just repeats itself for like a middle, like 10, 15 minutes almost. And like, we already get it. Like we already got the premise and we understood where this was going. Let's get to that, where it was actually going, And there's other episodes like The Wonderkind with John Cho and Jacob Tremblay, which definitely has shades of the Waldo moment from Black Mirror, obviously. But it's just something that's like so absurd and outlandish that even if you are willing to accept it, it basically is going exactly where it was always going to go. Like there's really no shock in it. I
Yeah.
think a lot of times when you do finally get to that resolution, you don't really feel anything, or like
Hmm.
there's no aha moment because like a lot of those twists, if they're even worth the twist, like you got it already, you know.
Yeah.
Like not all men. Like I like the swing, but obviously it's not subtle and like it just kind of resolves itself. There's nothing really to take away. So
Yeah. You know,
there's
it's as you're saying that, it's kind of funny because we started off saying how this was longer than the original Twilight Zone episodes, and it feels like they almost could have benefited from these being shorter.
yeah,
And I know that they're in a bit of or this genre, I guess, becoming more and more crowded. Black Mirror obviously is at the top of that, but Philip K. Dick's Electric Dreams on Amazon got some attention earlier in the year.
that's
Similar
last
type
year.
of concept. It was last year, geez,
Yeah.
2018. So. They're obviously trying to go up against competition and make a similar product, but I feel like if they leaned into the half hour, 25-minute episodes, that could actually really benefit them because, like we talk about with almost anything nowadays, less can be more. Um, what did you think of Jordan Peele's like usage through this? You know, he was kind of the big, or at least like the spokesman. He's in the narrator role for a lot of it, and then he really only gets shine in that last episode, or more to do in that last episode, I guess.
Yeah, I liked how they used him in Blurry Man the last episode. Really cool, just a meta
Mhm.
episode, Twilight Zone episode about people making the Twilight Zone. That was cool. That was well done. But
Yeah.
yeah, overall, it is interesting because he was marketed as like the creative mastermind, and yet he was obviously just the EP and
Mhm.
narrator, Rod Sterling role. But you know, obviously he didn't want to direct or really do any of the writing. He could have done that. They would. It's not like they turned him away. He just didn't want to do it. But
Right.
he kind of just was his genius, as it were, following Get Out and Us. You just kind of wish he was more present in the show. It just kind of feels like him and Monkey Paw just kind of co-signed this, and he has a small stake in it. You know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you wish creatively he had more of an influence. That's for sure.
Yeah. That's how I felt too. Also, being on CBS All Access obviously hurt this as well. Not a lot of people I can imagine are subscribing, and if they were, probably like you and I were subscribing just for the series.
Yeah, CBS All Access is very interesting. We haven't really talked about any. We haven't talked about any other shows on it. There's only a handful of new ones, really. But so far, I mean, their big shows are Star Trek Discovery. They're getting a second Picard show, The Good Fight, and now this Twilight Zone. Those are three shows that all have existing fandoms and an existing audience. And I guess that so far has been their plan, is to like target existing audiences and hope they'll pay to access
Mhm.
your new thing. But yeah, I think maybe too if the episodes were stronger, because remember I think Comedian was free on YouTube. They put out two of them right away. Maybe if they were stronger episodes and they caught more of a buzz or deserved more critical adoration, uh, it keeps going. But I mean, you'll notice none of the critics really checked back in on the
Nope.
show. They did their initial reviews after the first batch they get, which I believe is the first four, and very few sites revisited that. And I think that was both because the show didn't really feel special at the end of the day, and also because they probably didn't get enough traffic to,
Yeah.
make it worthwhile. So it was renewed for season two, though, quite quickly. So I'll certainly give it another chance, especially if the buzz is strong. But yeah, it just kind of feels like something that came and went. I think coming out in April uh, didn't help, considering Thrones was on at the time. Certainly
Hmm.
was not. And then even Black Mirror being on the horizon doesn't
Yep.
help. I mean, Black Mirror is influenced from the original Twilight Zone, obviously, and now we have this new Twilight Zone existing in a post Black Mirror world. You know, you gotta stand out, and ultimately, the show just didn't really feel special enough in the wealth of content you have to choose from.
Yeah, which is really too bad because they had a lot of talent. I mean, just that last episode alone, you talk about Seth Rogen, Zazie Beetz, and Jordan Peele all in
Yep.
it. I mean, Jessica Williams, like Barinholtz, and I mean that Not All Men episode had a lot of really famous people in it. Rhea
Mile,
Seahorn.
Adam Scott, Stephen
Yep.
Young, Greg Kinnear. Just a lot of great
Yeah.
actors on the show for sure.
I thought Greg that episode with Stephen Young, the Traveler, I thought was just so good. That's the one that highlights for me. Greg Kinnear, I thought was so good in that role, just playing like that doofy local chief. So good.
Chief,
yeah. So that definitely some good to take away, but mostly just disappointing. One of the few shows this year I feel like we've really been kind of let down by, I guess, other than Thrones, which, I mean, take that or leave that as a disappointment if you want. It's still amazing television, but can't say the same for Twilight Zone.